you can see from the outline that I'll be speaking on the priest as pastor, teacher, and administrator. And if I was more tech savvy, but I've been a bishop 13 years. And so in 2011, when I got the call to be an auxiliary bishop, I was a priest in San Francisco and spent 24 years in Marin County, which is across the Golden Gate Bridge, the northern of the three counties of the Archdiocese, and was a teacher and eventually president of Marin Catholic. In 2011, I was named auxiliary for 4 years in the Diocese of San Jose, which is an interesting experience in itself. And then I've been in Spokane 9, but I just was leaving. I taught a senior class. In fact, I scheduled my ordination as a bishop so that I could push the semester out as far as possible, get ordained, come back and give exams. But, I never was that great on the tech aspect of it. So you won't see the PowerPoint presentation with these great historical photos of saints and all of that. I prefer what I'm going to do is present and give you some thoughts on my experience on this. And then maybe, I don't know, there's response, I think, Peter, thank you. Just as the role of priest, pastor, teacher, and administrator, how many of you here are pastors of parish with a grade school? And how many of you are assigned to a chaplain or a teaching position in a high school? Quite a few. How many here are an administrator of a high school? Okay. So that makes a big deal, and I'll speak about that a little later. But I think, and how many here are graduates yourselves of Catholic schools in United States? We know that's a shift. For many years, although it's coming back again, the crucial role Catholic schools play in informing the potential vocations. Yes.
I graduated from Jesuit school as bishop, so I didn't raise my hand when you said.
In fact, I was looking over the deposition that I gave regarding that, and no, when I make references about religious order schools, we can include not just the Jesuits, but maybe the Christian Brothers and the Marianists. Anything that's a parallel church will have my wrap. So just a little bit, when I went to Spokane in 2015, I said I will not oversee a system of institutionalized mediocrity, which is what I found in the schools. The schools in the Northwest, unlike California, when the sisters began to withdraw from schools in probably the late 60s and 70s, because there were so many communities and so many of the dioceses in California, the bishops didn't just close schools. They kept them open. And of course, with the exception historically of the Immaculate Heart Sisters and their attempt to really secularize, and although Cardinal McIntyre got the brunt of the blame for that, which it wasn't, he just asked that they wear a visible garb, live in community, and pray together, and keep loyal to their foundation, which was education. Of course, he was seen as the evil one, but the schools were not closed. So I was fortunate. I was taught by the Daughters of Charity St. Vincent de Paul, and they were stable, continue to be. In fact, they're at the same grade school. And the De La Salle Christian Brothers, the Jesuits at USF, and then Sulpicians at seminary. But when I came to the Northwest, it may have been the case in some of the parts of the country. When the sisters left, they closed schools. The greatest offender of this was the Diocese of Helena, Montana, which had Hun Housen at the time, who was a priest of that diocese, went on to be the Archbishop of Seattle and of notoriety. But they closed schools. So I come to the diocese, there are no sisters teaching, and pastors had schools that they did not want. And you had principals who really weren't clear on it, and you had a community that had very much wanted schools, and if that was the case, they had the schools. If not, there were a lot of sheep without shepherds. So I think it's appropriate to have this topic as priest, as pastor, teacher, and administrator. I just say to you all, as priests involved in this ministry, you were first a priest, and that is my sometimes when I've done ordinations of religious, I said, are you going to be priests who happen to be Jesuits? Or are you going to be Jesuits who happen to be priests? Because there's a difference. And I think the diocesan priesthood, if we could be accused of anything, not of the parallel church, sometimes it's just mediocrity. We become like the bad general practitioner, and we have to be very careful of that. So first and foremost, if you are assigned as a pastor of a parish, you're assigned in a school, you are a priest. You are a shepherd after Christ's own heart. And that we learned after every diocese has crazy stories about men who, I don't know if I want to do parish anymore. Good, we'll put you in a high school. So they put him in a high school, and then 2 years later, he's out of the priesthood. And it's understanding first our role as shepherds after Christ's own heart. But we know in the Catholic school system in the United States, it has its roots, of course, to the Ursuline sisters in New Orleans, and then the first religious. But even before that, the boys were taught in the cathedral schools, the girls in the convent schools. System-wide, of course, in the United States, because of the Council of Baltimore in 1884, the decision, though, was never achieved, was that we'd have schools in every parishes. But they made a great run at it. And as Father said this today in his homily, the fear of the faith being lost, Protestantism, the whole Protestant movement, aggressive, especially here in the Midwest, the Germans, who have given us 2 world wars and the Reformation, and now an unusual version of synodality, at least in the United States, were very strong on Catholic education to combat the movement of Protestants. I would say that today, the secularism and the indifference to faith, if not downright hostility in certain parts of the country, is all the more reason why we need Catholic schools. And so we thank again that movement of those German farm families and other parts of the country that said Catholic education is absolutely necessary to combat this movement of aggressive Protestant hostility towards the United States. And although at a peak of the mid-60s, when the church in the United States was educating roughly 5 million children, we don't have that numbers today. I think we're about under 2 million, 1.5 million perhaps in that. As chair of the Bishop's Committee on Education, coming to an end after my 3-year term, I've made it a priority. We had to deal a lot with the gender issues and wokeism, which became in itself a hostility. And it's amazing how many of our schools rolled over and started embracing the whole DEI movement. But again, historically, the United States, the schools were seen not for the wealthy, not for an elite group of people, but as many Catholic families were to have their children in Catholic education, primarily in the parish. Prior to the diocesan high school, of course, we had parish high schools and religious owned and operated schools. So the movement of the diocesan school was in keeping with the bishop's vision of as many Catholic children in our schools as possible. But priest as pastor. I think just as those bishops in 1884 had the grace to see the peril of leaving the formation of young people to public schools, pastors and chaplains today are charged with maintaining the vision that guides our schools. And that's the why behind what the church does is more important than what we do. And we see this, in the ministries I have found as a bishop, when there is a parallel in the secular, if we're not careful, the secular will overcome the sacred. So what are those outside the parish? Education, healthcare, and social services. We know when you're in the dole with the government, when you have these big contracts, the tendency is to compromise. From my days, and I have to always preface, I came from what was Catholic San Francisco, not Nancy Pelosi San Francisco. I remember Nancy Pelosi's from Baltimore originally. And so there were 40 Catholic grade schools, there were 10 girls' schools and 3 boys' schools. And a very strong emphasis on the archdiocese, on the church. I say that is because I learned when I sat on the board of charities in the Archdiocese, when I was assigned, in addition to being president of the high school, a teacher, the chaplain of CYO and St. Vincent School for Boys, that Catholic charities was always because of these government contracts. My line was compassion, always, compromise never. Compassion with the poor, but not compromising church teaching. So what have we seen in secondary and university level? A reluctance in a setting of a lot of our Catholic colleges to proclaim, a reluctance to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ, and instead to embrace all things that are not of Christ in this church. We see this again in healthcare, the battle of finding out that some hospital systems were doing, for example, tubal ligations and other things like that. I say that the pastor, you as priest in the school setting, it is your responsibility as shepherd of your flock to make sure the vision of that school is the church's vision, the why behind what we do. And that's up. And why do I speak so strongly about that? Well, I was fortunate because I went to solid Catholic schools growing up, and then I was assigned in the suburbs to a great parish, Our Lady of Loretto, which was the largest of the parishes, with a great pastor, Monsignor Jim Keene, who himself had spent most of his priesthood teaching high school, and then administrator, and then running the school division of the orphanage, St. Vincent School for Boys. But his priorities were the school. He'd raised in the Depression, Irish American, but the school is the priority. The school received the biggest subsidy. I was assigned there in 1987 when I was ordained. The rectory was built in 62. My dad and mom come up to visit my third Sunday there. My dad was a furniture executive for a high-end chain out of New York. He comes out, he looks at the drapes in my room, and the whole lining on the back were all ripped to shreds. They were put in 62, and this was 87. It wasn't the priority of Monsignor Keene to make sure that the priests had new drapes. My dad was appalled at kind of the ripples in the carpet. Because can't you just have these things stretched? Wasn't the priority. His priority was the school, and eventually we got things fixed. But I learned from him the sacrifices that were necessary to school. And it was there with the Ursuline sister that I began to teach 1 day a week, each of the grades. So for the days of the week, I would teach one of the grades. And but it was so important that the parish mission was clear. It was about the salvation of souls, which is why we operate everything in the church, but it was also about making the school as affordable for as many Catholic families in this suburban environment. I learned a lot from his example. So you, as priests, maintaining that vision, the vision, that is the understanding the nature and the purpose and the essence of the Catholic school, is part of the responsibility. Now, depending upon what diocese you're from, every diocese probably has a number of pastors who will say their goal, their dream assignment is the suburban parish with no debt and no school. And why is that? Because either they had a bad experience or they realize that it's just so much work. And I want to tell you, if this is new to the younger men here, it is a lot of work. Bad situations with schools give priests heart attacks. But when they work well, you can't beat them. Because when Jesus says, let the children come to me and do not hinder them, that's exactly what he's telling us to do. Let these children come to him. And there is a grace that children have. Having taught high school for almost 20 years, you have kids come in, sometimes they, first time they've ever had anything religious in their life, the Catholic school. They should never be, our school was fortunate, it was called Marin Catholic. Now, if you're a football player, the only time that comes up in the thing is Gerald Goff, plays for Detroit, and there's a kid named Calcaterra played for UConn, and they made a lot of press out of Joey Calcaterra, Joey California, who went to Marin Catholic. But it's not one of these schools, you know, where you go, where'd you go to school? I went to Stonehaven Prep. Stonehaven Prep. Well, it's in the fill in the religious order tradition, you know. Well, schools that are pretty up there, like, I remember there was a basketball game and Gonzaga was playing Incarnate Word and all these sportscasters. What does Incarnate Word mean? You know, no misunderstanding when your school has Catholic in the title. But just because it is in the title does not mean it's going to be guaranteed. Again, the responsibility as pastor, the salvation of souls. This is your flock, and you are to tend to it. And it will be hard work. If a school's vision is not in Christ and the church, then it can be swept up in the most popular of currents. When I first went to the school, Marin Catholic, now, outside of Philadelphia, maybe New York, we were unionized. So sitting through union negotiations would be time off for purgatory if you have ever had to endure that. And not only was the school problematic, and there were 4 archdiocesan schools. There were at the time 2 boys schools. A Christian, my alma mater had merged with the Daughters of Charity School, and then we were co-ed from the beginning. It was so bad that there was an ex-nun reading tarot cards in religion class. They were using the AIDS education program from the public schools, which had been endorsed by, at the time, the superintendent of schools, who was a nun, because across the Bay in the Oakland Diocese, the superintendent of schools, also in that same order, was using that. So we come into this whole environment, and it was also the dumping ground, at least the last thing, of a crazy priest who would send postcards from his vacation to the nudist colony. So it just goes to show you, you couldn't ask him. Paul and I were at this overlap in Boston College, and I remember, I wouldn't believe the stories I was telling you. But I fast forwarded through hard work and the words I quoted the president who had been there a year before me. He asked the Archbishop to send someone else in. I was sent in. 6 months into my first year, his second year, he said at the breakfast table, he says, we're going to have to pray these people out of here. And it began a monthly holy hour with just a mustard seed of the faithful who came together for Eucharistic adoration, a brief reflection on the Sunday gospel and the rosary. And we received the gift at Holy Thursday that the head of the department was leaving, which was another whole set of stories for another time, but it was a great gift. And where did she go? To teach in a girls' school, another diocese where heresy reigns supreme. The next year, the ex-nun, the Wicca witch, reading tarot cards, left. So now there are priest alums. If you've ever listened to Brother Isaiah, now Father Isaiah, he is a CFR and he's popular with songs. I know, very popular young people. He's a graduate of the school. And we have the Ann Arbor Dominican Sisters, and there's a young priest who's a great guy there and a great lay president. But it wasn't easy. And for 14 out of those 19 years, I would also share in the reflection, I endured that generation. It was very difficult. Gave the first president a stroke at the age of 46. The next guy came in, kind of was overwhelmed by it, but let things happen providentially. And then I followed as president for 8 years. But I learned that you cannot lose. First of all, you have to be, I'll get to this, you have to be very competent. You have to be educated, you have to be hardworking. And when you're dealing in a middle and upper middle class environment, you have to really be on your game because they are a demanding crowd. But when you hold the line with them, you can't beat them. And so it is the responsibility, seeing yourself as priest, as pastor, with the ultimate responsibility of the salvation of souls. It frames things. And falling, now it just seems, we never thought this whole thing about transgenderism, that wasn't an issue. I left the school in 2011, that wasn't an issue. There were certain schools that were having the gay clubs and all that other stuff. The Archbishop was very clear at the time not to have this. That goes back to the 90s when it was going on in some of the religious order schools. But then the whole DEI and wokeism swept things. And I had the lay president of a religious order school come to see me, and he basically looked what you would find in the public school. He knew that there were going to be solid parents from that school are going to come to me and complain, though it wasn't under my jurisdiction on one level, except for the religious, which I had to remind the president and the chair of the board that I gave them their Catholic identity, not the provincial. But I told him, I said, you base your teaching on the sin of racism and prejudice on only two foundational standards. We're creating God's image and likeness, and we're beloved sons and daughters of God. Anything else will look like you have capitulated to wokeism, which they did. Now, I think now that they're going on to the next flavor of the month. Education circles, if you're in it long enough, seem to embrace the latest flavor of the month trend. And it is our expertise, like I had to speak to some obnoxious public school parents. I said, we've been at this a lot longer than you have, because of our schools go back to the cathedral schools and to the convent schools. And, but it is that responsibility when you see yourself as priest, as pastor, to make sure that these schools are rooted so they don't go down the path of the latest wokeism, whatever it is. You are literally protecting your sheep from the wolves. And now the wolves don't even need to hide as sheep anymore. They're just out there. And sometimes, and I use this when I was interviewed, this is a time in the church with our schools when we are mending the nets. Because we've had we're living with a lot of the upheaval, the confusion, and everything else. But we have to be honest. At the same time, we are one end of the boat mending the nets. There's someone at the end, perhaps cutting the nets. So we have people. And this is to show you how every diocese, I believe, should still have priests as pastor, overseeing something in education. You cannot make changes unless the top is solid. You'll be undermined. You could be a chaplain of a school and you can try all you want, but if the principal and the president are not believers, you're in trouble. So it's the old line, what is it? Get the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and the right people in the right seats. Until I became president, and having taught there and had a good principal, then our school was able to thrive as a Catholic college prep. It's the importance of forming leaders. So, you know, God willing, you will have priests in your diocese. Some of you who may be, as Michael and were sent off for degrees. Now there's a new program, I think at Ave Maria, I just was for education that seems to be very solid. Because some of these other programs, a certain very prestigious program of training Catholic school leaders, which was solid up until kind of the wokeism movement the last few years. In the final time of one of the priests that I know went through it, he says, look, giving you some advice, stay out of diocesan high schools because those bishops meddle too much. Get in private schools, private Catholic religious order schools or board, because you can really do a lot more without those bishops meddling. Now, if he was a fool to think that that wouldn't be reported back to the bishops, because it's my responsibility to meddle as it is as pastors to do that. A superintendent of schools. I had a great superintendent after 7 years, who's in her early 50s said, you know, I'm just becoming a grandmother. I like to step out of the job, but she was a great blessing. But the superintendent is crucial. Too many of the superintendents that bishops speak to me about struggles with basically either are mediocre in their commitment, they do not grasp the fact that you have to really be focused on your mission, your identity, your hiring. Or you have actually those who run a parallel church. It's the social justice church. And I'll speak about when we go to these extremes and how that's wrong. As pastor of souls, the priest has a very important role in forming teachers. About almost 20 years ago now, the Journal of Catholic Education noted, as staffing in Catholics K through 12 schools has transitioned from religious to predominantly lay, now I think it's only 2% religious, a parallel process of secularization was occurring in teacher education programs in the Catholic colleges and universities. You've all heard pastors say, I can't find good, solid Catholic teachers. How am I going to find good, solid Catholic principals and teachers? Well, it's easier to help train a solid Catholic with a knowledge of education to grow into leadership than I believe is to undo those who just don't believe. Now, I know I followed a guy once in the other diocese who really was an eye-opener for me, because as dioceses more international priests, depending upon what your experience is in your home country. You come here, and I know in South America and Latin America, the belief is Catholic schools are for the rich. So I don't want to be bothered by this school. No. I have found as a bishop, there are two forms of cultural Catholicism. There's ethnic and institutional. By ethnic, I mean, well, and the faith is passed on just by living in the family. No, it's not going to work anymore, because in certain communities, ethnic communities, they're leaving the church faster than the middle class Anglo. That doesn't work anymore. Grandma is not going to be passing on the faith along eating, the meals. The other extreme is institutional cultural Catholicism. Well, we always sent our sons to, St. Irenaeus, and they have the faith. No, they don't. They're learning how to protest at the School of the Americas, or they're, about building latrines down in Belize. But what do they really know? That said, you have some who want to swing to the far right and get in a time machine and go back to 1958 and think it's all about piety. And no concern about the poor, no concern about reaching out to people. Our patron of our Catholic schools in the United States, St. Elizabeth and Seton, had a great, the Savior is not in the extremes. Extremes are easy. You don't have to think much. But you have to be in this culture in which we are in, and I know from my own experience, as clever as serpents, as calm and wise, calm as and gentle as doves. What you do. The flamethrower approach to Catholicism won't work. I will only remove a man for heresy, immoral behavior, and theft. You don't go into a parish and because you don't like that stupid song, All Are Welcome, and blow the whole damn music program up, which I had to call a guy in about that. I don't like it either. There's that song in Vita Sur Spiritu.
Yeah.
Okay, I've heard that sung so poorly over a karaoke machine that I had a throbbing headache driving for hours back from a confirmation. Am I going to go blow the whole place up? No. But again, when you are a pastor in a parish with the caring of the souls, you'll have to make decisions about who to hire and acknowledge the fact that this is a difficult time in the church. Younger men, this is the cross you're going to have to carry. And I've noticed that some guys, because I worked in seminary, was a rector for a brief time as auxiliary bishop in California. Some of the guys don't want the hard work. But it is hard. You have to keep your eye on it. You cannot take your hand off. Any good pastor will tell you, being a pastor of a parish takes a lot of effort. We have a number of people who are well-intentioned, but don't have an understanding of church teaching, magisterial teaching. They don't have a grasp of Christian anthropology. And so we're working at it, founding it. We have to be very patient. These jobs have high demands and low pay. And so a pastor has to keep the mission foremost in the minds and hearts. And I want you to know that what I ask of the priests, because basically by the time this point in my time of being bishop of Spokane, we have the right men in parishes with one priest who was sent on for an advanced degree who will become eventually vicar of education. He's currently president of the Catholic schools. We have excellent principals who are faith-filled, and we have competent, knowledgeable finance people. Nothing is worse than the school failing because you had incompetent or dishonest finance people. So no, it's a basic mundane thing, but that's important. The diocese started in my diocese, the Nazareth Guild, which is to me well-intentioned. However, throwing money at the problem is not going to solve. My experience has always been, God will give us the money we need. It may not be what we want, but what we need. It's the least of my worries. Just have honest people, competent people, board of regents who are smart men and women who advise you, but realize that the school is the mission of the church. and it will all work out. But you have to go in and make sure that those good people, those honest people are there. So again, priest is pastor, you are the shepherd of that community, whether it is your president of school or chaplain of the school, pastor of the parish of the school, teacher formation. Now, I would imagine every diocese, I would think, has some type of handbook for pastors. We have a very simple one, handbook for pastors in Catholic schools. It's very practical. Now, in my diocese, we have priests who did attend Catholic schools. We have priests who did not attend Catholic schools. And I have to say something here, depending upon your diocese, if your diocese had what I would call mediocre schools, and you had priests who didn't really support them, and now you have solid Catholic faith, what happens? Well, the easy solution is we're going to homeschool. The difficulty with homeschooling at times is you've taken a more fervent Catholicism and you've robbed it from that school community. And then you have people who don't want to know. My experience is homeschooling is important, but I don't think it should be as widespread as it is. And why do I say that? Is because I noticed in my own diocese and other dioceses, those who wanted a solid Catholic education, which is what we should deliver, looked and did not see it. And they had pastors who thought, that's easier. I have my homeschooling co-op crowd who are very supportive of me. When you have a school, a parish school, you have parents who can be obnoxious. They want to know why they don't have a hot lunch every single day. They want to know why they don't have this sport and everything. You have to put up with that. And hopefully you have a strong principle. But I think when people moved into an area and they didn't see the school or the school was available, that's why they embraced it. So something as simple. How many of you have dioceses where there is a handbook for pastors with schools? Lord, I would say, I think it's divided up into basically the importance of school, a mission with my letter, the school as a vital parish ministry, expectation for pastors, that the school is a ministry of the entire parish. That's one of the reasons why parents were never solely responsible for all the finances of the school. There was a subsidy. California basically knocked the subsidies off. When I came to Spokane, I was pleasantly surprised the generosity of parishes on subsidies. Consequently, parishioners expect a buy-in of the parent community. And a good pastor will tell parents, everybody else is supporting your child here, even people whose kids have grown. You need to be active, active members of this parish community. And that's a very fair expectation. So this fosters just different points, the importance of the pastor involved in the school, communication between school finance. Now, I have a situation, I've been advising a pastor in California where you have a long-term tradition of basically telling the pastor to butt out. I would never put up with it. But he had a lot going on. And to me, that's criminal. That's not the way it works. I have a buddy of mine who's pastor in Indiana, and he goes into a parish and the principal won't surrender the credit card, or at least the bills for the credit card. And the youth minister for the school tells him, I'll be giving the homilies at all the masses. Well, needless to say, he went through that school, a Sherman through Atlanta, and he put up with black armbands and the faculty protesting him. And he basically corrected a situation. The Archbishop was very happy with him, and he says, I've done what I need to do. Let a new man come in now and do that. Should never have been to that point. So we have, again, school is a vital parish ministry, expectations of pastors, tips for consideration, faith formation, responsibilities between pastors and principals. How many here have dioceses where there's 3 pastors or 3 parishes responsible for one central school? Yeah, that usually creates a monstrous situation because, who's really responsible? Spokane had this, they closed parish schools, they renamed them. It's a disaster. Fortunately, it's much better now, but I would never have I've never would allow that. I would have said, I'm sorry, this school, because of demographics, will close, but we'll keep this name. But when I first came, there were 3 pastors, 1 school. No one really wanted to be involved in that school. And 1 guy had stepped foot in that school in months. When I was pastor as an auxiliary bishop of the Diocese of San Jose, the guy I followed basically did not believe in Catholic schools, which, sidebar, makes it all the more difficult when you're in the middle and upper middle class area, because people can say, well, we don't need to go to the Catholic school, the public schools. We don't operate Catholic schools because of bad public schools. And nothing irritates me more. I noticed the vicar general, my vicar general of the diocese, looking at me, waiting for me to just blow up when someone said, well, in the public schools, don't tell me what's going on in the public schools. I'm not interested. I know what we do and what we do well. But in this case, when I was pastor, following this guy, he got in a fight with the 2nd grade first communion parents, wouldn't be in the photograph. And this is where he wasn't a good pastor. Confessions when I came, 5th grade, let's say 3rd grade went to confession in Advent, 4th grade went in Lent, 5th grade went in Advent. So these kids went once a year in a Catholic school. And it turned out you unravel it. His wife was an ex-nun who taught in the public school, and he had no time for it. So I had to basically come in and make a lot of changes. I thought there was, first and foremost, he forgot he was the pastor. The priest as teacher. Now, bishops traditionally are called, to teach, govern, and sanctify. But every religious, I believe, does the same thing in your community, whether you're a priest or a brother or a sister, teach, govern, and sanctify. So the priest as a teacher. When Jesus, one of the great treasures of the Diocese of Spokane is my crozier, which goes back to 1913 when the diocese was created. It was given by the school children. So the Catholic schools existed before the diocese, and it is of Jesus teaching the young. And as a great reminder, as I said, the schools are here before the existence of this, as the Diocese of Spokane. It was the Western Territory of Washington. But you as a teacher, some are going to be better teachers than others. In fact, we probably preach best when we learn how to teach in a classroom of high school students. But as another Christ who taught, it is up to us and to you to instruct the faithful. There's so much confusion. Now we teach with charity. A flamethrower approach to Catholicism is not going to work. But at some point we can't, again, why I began, compassion always, compromise never. The priest is a teacher. So you will be working with faculty and the principal. You'll be doing something with students. If you're a pastor of a parish and you can get into the classroom, I think it's very important. If you have a seminarian, we have seminarians, we have a college seminary, Bishop White, where they go to Gonzaga, and we have a propedeutic program for men who haven't yet begun college. And one of the things we did was have them go into two of the Catholic grade schools as teachers, teacher's aid, and also to do a little bit of catechetical work for them, getting them ready, because it's so important to take on that role. I think there's a lot of confusion. I think was brought up in Father's talk. A lot of people, depending upon the generation, really aren't well formed in the faith. And what do? Let them continue on that path, or do we try to do what we can do, knowing that it is the seeds being sown? So I think to see yourself in that role as teacher is very important. To go into the class, to teach, to work with parents, to work with faculty, to make sure that that faculty has opportunities at least once a year at the beginning for retreat. There's also something I think to be said about the importance of our own prayer life. When the disciples can't heal and drive out, Jesus says some it's because of prayer and fasting. In our own life, we have to have elements of prayer and fasting. We're offering things up, that old school term, for the people entrusted to us. Because I think our young people are meant for truth. We're all meant for truth, but young people discover that. When I was teaching in high school, no curriculum for the senior class was, you couldn't find it all in one book. So we modified over a period of time. Freshman year was an overview of Catholicism. Second year was scripture. Third year was morality, teaching, social justice. Fourth, I, as president, made across the board was apologetics, the why behind what the church teaches. And I did that because kids would come back from college and say, hey, they found out I went to Marin Catholic, and they asked me, why does the church teach what it does on marriage, on abortion, on euthanasia, mainly the moral issues? And I said, whether you believe it or not, you need to know why the church teaches what it does. And God willing, in humility, you will come to see the wisdom of the church. But to know that in that capacity as teacher, it is up to you and to me as to teach, govern, and sanctify, that we provide the truth to our young people and what it is to believe. Young people are drawn to truth and to justice, and they can sniff out hypocrisy in a moment's notice. I think the best priest teacher is the one who, and religious, who prioritizes prayer and our relationship with God. Finally, the priest as administrator. To administrators to lead, and I have found, where is there weak leadership in the church? Weak leadership in the church comes from, I think, three areas. People, men who are scared. They're afraid of being canceled, uninvited to the social gatherings, being torn apart in the paper. They live their priesthood, they live their religious life in fear. That leads to poor leadership. The second, and I guess I could say this applies to bishops, of course. The second are the compromisers. You have to, get along with people, so you got to go along. That's really not that important. You begin to start modifying things. Boy, we have to compete in this highly academic world, so we're going to reduce the requirements. We're going to make religion classes so generic. Retreat experiences, mission trips. Forgetting the why behind all that. The great compromisers. So those who live by fear, those who live to compromise, and I don't want to scandalize you, but there are those, I don't know what they believe. It's the church, as I said, there's two ways to be a pastor of a parish that are wrong. One is you're the mayor of a village of peasants, and the other is you're an activities director on a cruise line. No, you're not. You're another Christ for the salvation of souls. So to administer, but I have found, I had a couple of guys I had to say, now, it's not a good fit for you to be a pastor of a parish with school. The first one was on Good Friday, about, I think it was 2019, the superintendent called me and goes, Bishop, you're going to have to call Father so-and-so. Why? He goes, he has the 8th grade boys locked in the classroom. He won't let them out. Why? He claims they vandalized the bathroom. So I call him on his cell phone. I said, where are you? And he goes, I'm in the 8th grade classroom. And I got the 8th grade boys here. I'm not letting them out till they admit what they did. I said, Sean, let my people go. What are they? They threw paper towels up on the ceiling. I said, then on Tuesday, come in and see me. You should be over in the church getting your homily ready for Good Friday. I know, but I said, just come and see me on Tuesday. So he meets with me. I said, this is not working. You can't have a parish at the school. But now he's happy. He's dealing in a rural parish, and he's dealing with a church that has a ceiling full of bad crap ready to collapse. And he wants me to close the church, but it's on a reservation. The second was, I had a guy who was meddling in the school too much. Overly involved in it, he was just, light bulb fixtures, texture of toilet paper, everything. And I said, and I had to basically take the jaws of life to get him out of that parish. But I thought he's too controlled. Versus my first assignment, Sister Jeanette would come over at recess, check in with Monsignor King. They'd have a 10-minute briefing, and that would be it. Except on Fridays when he played golf in Sonoma County. And she would meet with him right after Mass. But I learned the importance of that communication. But when you're an administrator, you may be, of course, you may be the president of school, the headmaster. That may be more focused, and you better be, again, hardworking, qualified in your education, willing to make hard decisions. And to do so with humility. Now, anyone who's ever heard me speak, I'm often, this has become now my, really, I've learned from my own life. And you'll like this. My sister was home from college, my oldest sister, I'm one of 7. She goes, she's in the kitchen, it's October. Where are you going to go to high school? And I said, well, Father Burns thinks I should go to St. Ignatius. Maybe I told the story more than my mom turns around to the stove. You're not going to go to St. Ignatius. You're going to go to the Christian Brothers at Sacred Heart and learn humility. I didn't know what humility was, let alone that I needed it. But I then followed, and all my brothers went there, my sisters. But I said that humility is absolutely essential in our role as priests, in our role as religious, in our role as leadership, as administrators, humility. And what is humility? Well, maybe it's because it's the French school of spirituality, but let's cut to the chase. My uncle said about my brother, Pat, I like to buy you for what you're worth and sell you for what you think you're worth. And I think that is the definition of humility. We're never as great as we think we are, but we're never as bad as we think we are. To be humble. Vincent Paul said, humility is truth and pride is a lie. He said the best way to combat the devil is to be humble. Why? Since he does not know humility, he does not know how to fight humility. So humility is important. The second, gratitude. I think of all the blessings I've received in my life, from the faith that I was given, the example of the teachers, the sisters, the brothers, the Jesuit priests, the Sulpicians, the priests in my parish, the lay teachers, the coaches, everything else. My family. Why should we boast? All that we have, we receive. The importance of being grateful. Because when you're humble and grateful, you can be generous. Generosity of heart is what is needed in a priest and religious, to give of yourself. But when you're humble, grateful, and generous, you will have peace and joy. Too often, we have well-intentioned priests and religious who look that they don't know that Christ rose from the dead. I love that line in the office of the readings. Excuse me, not the office of the readings, in the petitions. Radiate the glory of the resurrection. We have to have joy in our life. We're not talking about sappiness, but true joy. Joy is a choice. And, I think the Italians, I might be not pronouncing properly, but we had an Italian teacher at Marin Catholic. She used to say, well, why does everyone have the muzzalungo, the long face? I don't know what that, I might be mispronounced. But the Irish have a better phrase. Yeah, he has the vomit face. And that is not going to lead people to Jesus Christ. There's a lot of things out there. These are difficult times to serve the church, to serve Christ and his church. In these ministries, when we're constantly combated with, secularism and everything else. But I always used to tell the seminarians, and I tell the priests, when I went to, we tried to find this place actually last week in Paris. I was on this pilgrimage to Our Lady of Lourdes. But in Paris, just a short distance from the Rue de Bac, the miraculous medal of Daughters of Charity Mother House. I visited this the first time in France in '99, and it's the Carmelite seminary, where they would round up during the Revolution priests, and they put them in an upper room, in a room maybe half this size. There would be bars, which you'd come up the steps like jail cell. There would be a window with bars, you look down. They would come up and randomly, there might be 20 priests or something, or religious, you, and you. You come out, take you down the stairs, everybody won the window where the bars are, you look, they tell you to take the oath to the divine constitution, the civil constitution, they cut your head off if you chose to be martyred. They come back up, and the revolutionaries would put the swords against the wall. That would be the blood-soaked plaster. Now it's encased in glass. It's called the Room of the Swords. It could be that for us. but it's not. It's obnoxious. Parents, it's worried about heating bills and everything else. It's just meant to be part of the cross that we carry. And the priest, the religious as the administrator, has the responsibility. And sometimes, again, as the pastor, ultimate responsibility for this endeavor, this work of the church. Why do we do it? Because it's what Jesus asks us to do. Let the children come to me and do not hinder them. All the documents, and you'll hear later about the Holy See's documents and the other things that have been taught. Catholic education is a privileged place of integral formation. When it works, it cannot be topped. This integral formation is so important that everything the school does has to be integrated with that. And that's what I think this is going to be the challenge that all of you will be facing. Our schools, if we still have schools, we have to be very careful they don't become public schools with religious scaffolding around them. It has to be integral approach. And I think this is under the office of Mary Pat Donahue's work in Washington. And what I've tried to do as chair is to make sure that we have this integrated approach to Catholic education, because too often it's compartmentalized and we know what that leads to. Nothing. In fact, sometimes people would have been better off not going to a school. I remember that. Father didn't think this was anything wrong with this. Well, look what happened. The school went off the rails. You had an ex non-reading tarot cards in class. Didn't that seem to be an alarm to you? So the priest and administrative roles are responsible for ensuring that the policies and practices of the diocese and the school reflect the mission. Now, I'm a big fan of the importance of athletics in our schools, but they can't be the tail wagging the dog. On the other hand, I don't want a school that's known for its Shakespearean festivals either. No offense, but that just leads to a lot of weird people running around dressing up in Renaissance outfits. A well-run school ultimately reflects the locals. We need to keep that in mind. Now, as a practical thing to you, maybe a refresher course on what it means in your role as religious, as priests or pastors. Read from the beginning of the Sermon on Pastors by St. Augustine, that's in the Office of Readings, that goes on for roughly 2 weeks, the 24th and 25th. And he has great insights and descriptions about a good pastor and a bad pastor. And I think that is very practical as a reminder of the responsibility that you carry in your role. And I think that I also say to this, there are schools, not seminaries and novitiates. Don't expect perfection. That's sometimes I have found that you have priests who only want to have their homeschooling fan club because they all love Father. Okay, I had to tell this one priest, I said, look, if they hated you, no, they hated me before you. And I'm not, but I don't want people to go around looking to pick fights. Don't run from a fight, but don't pick a fight when it comes to fostering the identity. The school, again, is a Eucharistic community. It's an extension of the parish work. It is a response to our call, our vocation, our mission to save souls.